At 11:47 p.m., with rain streaking the windows of Harbor Light Diner, Lillian Sanchez was wiping beneath table 7 when something flashed beside the metal leg. A diamond ring. Her phone vibrated inside her apron. Final payment due $486, deadline 12:00 p.m. tomorrow. For several seconds, Lillian stood completely still. The diner was almost empty. The security camera pointed toward the register, not beneath the tables. No one seemed to have seen what she had found. But across the rain-dark parking lot, inside a black sedan, Vivian Whitmore sat motionless behind the steering wheel, watching through the glass. Lillian had no idea. And what she did with that ring would change both women in ways neither could yet understand. Before we continue, tell us what country you're watching from and your local time. And if stories about quiet choices and unexpected kindness mean something to you, you're always welcome here. 1. Honest dollar at a time. 14 hours before Lillian Sanchez found the diamond beneath table 7, her day began with the sound of an engine refusing to turn over. It was 7:03 on a gray Baltimore morning. Lillian sat behind the wheel of her 2007 Chevrolet Malibu, one hand gripping the steering wheel, while the other held the key in the ignition. The engine coughed once. Then silence. "Come on," she whispered. "Not today." From the passenger seat, 11-year-old Jordan Sanchez looked up from the peanut butter toast balanced on a napkin across his knees. "Try the thing." Lillian glanced at him. "What thing? The thing where you threatened to sell it?" Despite herself, she smiled. She turned the key again. "Listen, Malibu. I have been loyal to you for 6 years. Don't make me put you on the internet for $800. The engine sputtered, shook violently, then finally came alive. Jordan lifted both hands. "See, your mechanical expertise is terrifying." Their laughter lasted only a few seconds, but Lillian held on to it. Small moments mattered in their apartment, in their car, in their life. When money was short, you learned that joy did not have to be expensive. They lived on the second floor of a narrow brick apartment building in West Baltimore. Their place had 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen barely wide enough for 2 people to stand side by side, and a radiator that clanged like someone trapped inside the wall. But Lillian kept it clean. There were magnets on the refrigerator from places they had never visited, purchased for 50 cents at thrift stores, because Jordan liked imagining trips. Chicago, Yellowstone, San Francisco. Someday, Lillian always told him. She never said when. At 7:26, she dropped Jordan at school. "Math quiz," she reminded him. "I know, show your work, I know. And $1 honest dollar at a time," Jordan interrupted dramatically. "That has absolutely nothing to do with mathematics. It has numbers in it." He grinned, closed the car door, and ran toward the entrance. Lillian watched until he disappeared inside. Then her smile faded. The gas gauge hovered just above empty. She opened her banking app. 63.18. That had to cover gasoline, groceries, and anything unexpected until Friday. Unfortunately, unexpected had become the most predictable expense in her life. At 8:10, Lillian entered Baltimore Community Career Center carrying a second-hand canvas bag stuffed with notebooks. For 7 months, she had been working toward a food service management certificate. She already knew restaurants. She knew how to carry 4 plates without burning her wrists. She knew which customers wanted conversation and which wanted silence. She could remember 6 drink orders without writing them down, and recognize from 20 feet away when a kitchen was falling behind. But Lillian wanted to understand the part of the business nobody had ever allowed her near. Inventory, scheduling, food costs, vendor contracts, safety compliance, operations. She wanted something that could move her from carrying plates to helping run the room. That morning, the instructor projected an inventory worksheet onto the wall. "If you don't know where your waist is," he said, "you don't know where your money is." Lillian wrote the sentence down. She had already been thinking about waste at Harbor Light Diner. Every night she watched trays of untouched bread disappear into trash bags. Soup made in oversized batches went down the drain. Produce spoiled because new deliveries were stacked in front of old ones. She had started recording it in a small notebook she kept in her apron. Not because anyone asked her to, because she wanted to understand. At 10:42, class ended. Lillian stayed behind to speak with the administrator. She already knew what the woman would say. "Ms. Sanchez, we've extended the deadline twice. I know. The remaining balance is $486. I know. Tomorrow at noon is the absolute cutoff." Lillian tightened her grip on her bag. "What happens if I can't make the whole payment? Your enrollment is suspended. You can reapply next term, and the credits I've completed most should transfer. Most." It was a small word with dangerous possibilities. Lillian nodded. "Thank you." She did not ask for another exception. Outside, she sat in the Malibu for almost a minute before starting it. $486. 3 weeks earlier, she had possessed nearly that amount. Then the Malibu's alternator failed. $327. 2 days later, the landlord announced a rent increase beginning the following month. Every careful number in Lillian's notebook had shifted. She had picked up extra shifts, skipped takeout, delayed buying new work shoes even though the soles were thinning. Still, she had fallen short. By 2:18 p.m., Lillian was tying a burgundy apron around her waist inside Harbor Light Diner. The place had been open since 1974. Its chrome trim had lost its shine. The red vinyl booths were cracked at the corners, and the coffee seemed permanently burned after 6 in the evening. But it was familiar. Lillian. Curtis Bennett stood beside the register holding the schedule. At 48, Curtis had managed the diner long enough to believe every problem could be solved by giving somebody fewer hours or more hours, depending on which option benefited the diner. "You still doing those classes?" "Yes?" He tapped the schedule. "Denise called out Saturday. I can give you 12 hours. I have class Saturday morning." Curtis stared at her. "So skip it. I can't. You need money, don't you?" Lillian said nothing. Everybody at Harbor Light knew she was trying to finish the certificate. Curtis lowered his voice. "Look, I'm trying to help you. 12 hours is 12 hours. And one class becomes 2, 2 becomes a month. It's a certificate, Lillian. A piece of paper." She looked towards the kitchen. Harold Mitchell was sliding trays into the warming station. A busboy carried a trash bag past them half filled with dinner rolls. A delivery driver was stacking fresh produce in front of boxes that had arrived days earlier. Lillian saw everything Curtis didn't. "It's not the paper," she said. "Then what is it?" "It's what I can do after I earn it." Curtis gave a tired laugh. "You've got a job. I know. I can give you more shifts." And 5 years from now, Curtis stopped smiling. Lillian immediately regretted the sharpness in her voice, but she did not take the question back. She had done the arithmetic too many times. More shifts meant more money this week. More shifts also meant fewer classes. Fewer classes meant staying exactly where she was. She had nothing against waiting tables. Honest work had fed her son for years. But honest work and permanent struggle were not supposed to be the same thing. Curtis folded the schedule. "Offer expires by tonight." Then he walked away. Lillian started her shift. At 5:30, she served a retired couple who split a turkey club. At 6:15, a construction crew filled booths 3 through 6. At 7:08, a little girl spilled chocolate milk across the floor and apologized so seriously that Lillian nearly laughed. At 8:20, she finally took a 6-minute break. In the employee room, she opened her locker. On the top shelf sat a glass jar. It had once contained spaghetti sauce. Now it held crumpled one's quarters dimes and the occasional $5 bill. Months earlier, Jordan had found the jar in the recycling bin. "What's this for?" he had asked. My escape fund. Escape from what being broke." Jordan had considered this carefully. Then he found a strip of masking tape and a blue marker. He wrote 5 words in the uneven handwriting of a 10-year-old $1 honest dollar at a time. Lillian had laughed when she saw it. "You think dishonest dollars grow faster?" Probably, Jordan had said. "But then you'd have to be dishonest." She had stopped laughing. The label remained. Now Lillian unscrewed the lid and counted. 71.36. She had already counted it twice that week. It had not multiplied. She put the money back, Her phone buzzed. An email. Final payment reminder. Amount due $486. Deadline 12 Elrit p.m. tomorrow. Lillian stared at the numbers until the screen dimmed. She could empty the jar. She could use the $63.18 in her checking account. She could delay the electric bill. She could take Curtis's extra shift. She could do all of it and still come up short. Harold appeared in the doorway. You eating? Lillian locked her phone. In a minute. He glanced at the untouched sandwich beside her. That's what you said yesterday. I ate yesterday. A bag of chips is not a meal. It had barbecue seasoning. That's practically a vegetable. Harold shook his head and disappeared back into the kitchen. Lillian smiled faintly. Then she looked again at the jar, one honest dollar at a time. She tightened the lid. At 9:16 p.m., the bell above the diner's front door rang. A woman in her 60s stepped inside alone, shaking rain from the shoulders of a dark coat. There was nothing flashy about her. No entourage, no expensive car visible through the rain, but Lillian noticed something immediately. The woman looked tired in a way sleep would not fix. Evening, Lillian said. Sit wherever you like. The woman glanced across the nearly full diner. Her eyes settled on an empty booth beside the window. Table 7. She walked toward it slowly. Lillian grabbed a menu and followed. Coffee black, please. As the woman lowered herself into the booth, the overhead light caught something on her left hand. A diamond. Large enough that Lillian noticed it without meaning to. The woman noticed Lillian noticing. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. Then Lillian simply turned the coffee cup upright. I'll bring you a fresh pot. The woman looked down at the ring. Her thumb moved across it once, slowly, almost painfully, and although Lillian could not possibly know it yet, before that night ended, the diamond on Vivian Whitmore's finger would lie beneath that very table, waiting for someone who desperately needed money to decide what kind of future she was willing to buy. The woman at table 7. At 9:16 p.m., Vivian Whitmore sat alone at table 7 while rain traced crooked silver lines down the diner window beside her. Lillian Sanchez returned with a fresh pot of coffee and filled the white ceramic mug nearly to the rim. Careful, she said. This one's actually hot. Vivian wrapped both hands around the cup. Thank you. You want a minute with the menu I already know. Lillian took out her order pad. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, no gravy on the potatoes, black coffee. Lillian glanced at her. You've been here before, years ago. Then you're taking a risk. People remember food better than restaurants, remember recipes. For the first time since entering, Vivian almost smiled. I'll take the risk. Lillian wrote down the order. Anything else? No, coming up. As Lillian walked away, Vivian watched her weave between tables. She had not come to Harbor Light Diner because she was hungry. 2 hours earlier, she had been sitting in a law office 12 blocks away, staring at the diamond ring on her left hand, while an attorney named Samuel Green waited patiently across from her. You don't have to decide tonight, he had told her. I've been deciding for 9 years. Samuel had leaned back. Selling it won't change what happened, I know. Keeping it won't either. I know that too. That was the problem. The ring had become an argument with a dead man. Raymond Whitmore had placed it on Vivian's finger 38 years earlier in a small church in East Baltimore. At the time, neither of them had much money. The diamond had been smaller then. On their 20th anniversary, Raymond had replaced it with the stone she wore now. For years, Vivian had thought the larger diamond represented everything they had built together. A marriage, a family, a company, trust. Then she learned how easily one of those things could exist after another had already disappeared. She rotated the ring slowly now. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, a private jeweler was scheduled to evaluate it. Vivian intended to sell. At least that was what she had told Samuel. Across the diner, Lillian pushed through the swinging kitchen door. Meatloaf mash, no gravy, she called. Harold Mitchell looked over from the grill. Table 7. Yes. Haven't seen her before. She says she used to come here. Harold shrugged. Everybody used to come here. Lillian reached for a tray. Harold noticed her glance toward the employee room. You keep checking that phone, you're gonna make the money appear by intimidation. I'm trying. How much? Lillian paused. Enough. Harold studied her, but did not press. That was one of the reasons she liked him. Harold could recognize a closed door without trying the handle. A voice came from the dining room. Miss. Lillian turned. Booth 4 needed another Coke. Table 2 wanted ranch. Someone at the counter was waving a receipt. For the next 20 minutes, Lillian barely stopped moving. Vivian's meatloaf arrived at 9:39. Anything else? Lillian asked. No, thank you. Vivian cut a small piece. She took one bite, then another. The food tasted almost exactly as she remembered it. That surprised her. She and Raymond had eaten here when they were young. Back then, Harbor Light had stayed open all night. Raymond would order pancakes regardless of the hour, and Vivian would complain that breakfast at midnight made no sense. Time is just a suggestion, Raymond used to say. She had loved that about him. Later, she had hated it. The same man who could make rules feel unnecessary could eventually convince himself that certain promises were flexible too. Vivian set down her fork. Her appetite disappeared. At 9:54, Lillian passed table 7 carrying 3 empty plates. She noticed the meatloaf had barely been touched. Everything okay? Yes. You sure the food is fine? Lillian looked at the plate, then at Vivian. Want me to box it? Maybe later. All right. Lillian started to leave, then noticed Vivian's coffee. Cold. She touched the pot in her hand. Also cold. I'll get you a fresh one. That's not necessary. Coffee this bad shouldn't also be cold. This time, Vivian did smile. A few minutes later, Lillian returned with a steaming pot. She poured without asking. Vivian watched the dark coffee rise. You do that for everyone, she asked. Do what? Notice? Lillian rested the pot against her hip. It's my job. I've met plenty of people who do their jobs without noticing anyone. Lillian considered that. Some nights you don't need advice, she said. You just need something warm that stays. The sentence was casual. Lillian did not know why she said it. Maybe because Vivian had been staring at the same piece of meatloaf for 15 minutes. Maybe because sadness had a recognizable stillness. Vivian looked down at the coffee. Something in her face changed. Lillian immediately worried she had crossed a line. Sorry, long shift, no. Vivian touched the side of the mug. It was kind. Lillian nodded once. Then Booth 4 called for another refill, and the moment ended. But Vivian continued thinking about the words. Something warm that stays. Raymond had not stayed. Not entirely. His body had remained beside hers for decades, but part of their marriage had disappeared the day Vivian discovered the financial records he had hidden. Years later, cancer took the rest of him before they finished learning how to forgive each other. The diamond remained. Perhaps that was why Vivian hated it. It had stayed when everything it was supposed to represent had changed. At 10:31, the diner began thinning out. Rain intensified against the windows. Vivian finally asked for a box. Lillian packed the meatloaf and potatoes, placed them in a paper bag, and brought the check. Take your time. Vivian reached into her purse. Her phone vibrated. She checked the screen. A message from the jeweler. Tomorrow, 10 Zelrod a.m. Confirmed. Vivian stared at it, then at the ring, without fully understanding why she slid the diamond from her finger. The skin beneath it was pale. 38 years. She placed the ring on the table beside a folded paper napkin. For several seconds, she simply looked at it. Then a chair scraped loudly behind her. A toddler began crying near the register. Curtis called Lillian's name from the kitchen. Vivian reached into her purse for her wallet. The napkin caught against her sleeve. It slid toward the edge of the table. The ring moved with it. Neither Vivian nor Lillian saw the diamond fall. It struck the vinyl seat, once bounced silently onto the carpet beneath the booth, then rolled until it stopped beside the chrome table leg. Vivian paid in cash. The bill was $18.42. She left $25 on the table. When Lillian returned, Vivian was already putting on her coat. "Good night," Lillian said. Vivian paused. She looked at the name tag pinned to Lillian's burgundy apron. Lillian. "Good night, Lillian. Drive safe. Roads are ugly." Vivian picked up the paper bag. For some reason, she almost said something else. She almost told Lillian about Raymond, about the jeweler, about the ridiculous feeling that selling a piece of carbon might somehow make grief simpler. Instead, she only said, "Thank you for the coffee. Anytime." Vivian walked toward the door. The bell rang softly as she stepped outside. Cold rain hit her immediately. She hurried across the parking lot toward her black sedan. Inside the diner, Lillian collected the $25. She entered the payment at the register. The tip was $6.58. She slipped the bills into her apron. $6.58, closer to nowhere near enough. At 10:44, Vivian climbed into her sedan and placed the takeout bag on the passenger seat. She started the engine. The dashboard illuminated. Her phone connected automatically. She pulled the seatbelt across her chest. Then her right hand moved toward the steering wheel. Her left followed. Vivian froze. Her thumb touched the bare skin of her ring finger. Nothing. She looked down. The diamond was gone. No. She searched her lap, her coat pockets, her purse. She emptied tissues, keys, lipstick, and receipts onto the passenger seat. Nothing. Then she remembered. The table. Vivian looked through the rain toward Harbor Light. She could barely see the windows from where she was parked. She turned off the engine and got out. By the time she reached the sidewalk, her hair was damp, and rain had darkened the shoulders of her coat. She was only 20 feet from the entrance when she stopped. Through the glass, Lillian was clearing Table 7. Vivian raised a hand toward the door. Then she saw Lillian crouch. Lillian had noticed something beneath the table. Vivian could not see the object clearly, but she saw the waitress reach under the booth. Then Lillian slowly stood. The overhead light caught the diamond between her fingers. Vivian's breath caught. She should have opened the door. She should have said, "That's mine." Instead, she remained beneath the narrow awning outside. Inside, Lillian stared at the ring, then her phone vibrated. She pulled it from her apron. The screen lit her face. Vivian could not read the message from outside. She could only see the change in Lillian's expression. The woman who had been smiling at customers all evening suddenly looked exhausted. Lillian lowered herself into the booth. The diamond remained in one hand. The phone remained in the other. Vivian took one step toward the door, then stopped again. She did not yet know about the $486. She did not know about Jordan. She did not know about the glass jar in the employee room. She only knew that the waitress holding her diamond had looked at it differently after reading whatever was on that screen. And somewhere beneath Vivian's old grief, a question appeared. A question shaped by years of betrayal. A question she would soon regret asking. What did honesty look like when a person believed no one was watching? Vivian lowered her hand from the door and waited. $486. At 11:47 p.m., Lillian Sanchez sat alone at table 7 with a diamond ring in one hand and her phone in the other. The message on the screen was painfully simple. Final payment due $486. Deadline 12:00 p.m. tomorrow. She read it twice, although nothing changed the second time. Then she looked at the ring. Even beneath Harbor Light, diner's tired fluorescent lights, the diamond seemed impossibly bright. Lillian knew nothing about jewelry, but she knew enough to understand that this was not a $100 ring. It might be worth thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. Her first thought frightened her because of how quickly it came. This could fix everything. Not forever, but tonight, she could pay the tuition, repair the Malibu properly, buy groceries without calculating every item before reaching the register. Then shame followed the thought. Lillian closed her fingers around the ring. Stop. The diner had emptied. Harold was cleaning the kitchen. Curtis was in his office finishing paperwork. The last customers had left minutes earlier. Lillian glanced toward the security camera above the register. It covered the front counter and part of the dining room, not the floor beneath table 7. No one had seen her find the ring. At least that was what she'd believed. Outside rain streamed down the windows. Beyond the glass, Vivian Whitmore stood beneath the awning, partially hidden by darkness. She could see Lillian. Lillian could not see her. Lillian looked again at the payment notice. $486. She imagined walking into school tomorrow and paying the balance. She imagined telling Jordan she had made it. She imagined finally completing the certificate. Then another image came. The glass jar. The strip of masking tape. Jordan's crooked blue handwriting. $1 honest at a time. Lillian almost laughed at the cruelty of it. An honest dollar at a time had gotten her $71. One dishonest decision could solve the problem before midnight. Her phone rang. Jordan. Lillian answered immediately. Hey, why are you awake? You're late. I'm closing. Mrs. Carter said I can stay until you get here. Their neighbor watched Jordan on Lillian's late shifts. You finish your homework? Yes. Math too, yes. A pause. Did you get the money? Lillian stared at the diamond. No, baby. Oh, I'll figure something out. You always say that. Because I always do. Jordan was quiet. Then he said, drive careful. It's raining. I will. Go to sleep. Love you more. She ended the call. For several seconds, Lillian did not move. Then she whispered to the empty booth. What am I supposed to teach him if I take this? That answered the question. She stood. Outside, Vivian watched. Lillian did not put the ring into her apron. She carried it openly toward the back office. Vivian moved closer to the glass. Curtis was sitting behind a cluttered desk when Lillian knocked. What, I found something. She opened her palm. Curtis stared. Jesus. Under table 7. He stood immediately and took the ring. He held it beneath the desk lamp. That reel looks real. Curtis turned it between his fingers. Anybody see you find it? Lillian looked at him. Why does that matter, I'm asking? No. Curtis whistled softly. This could be 15 grand. Maybe more. Put it in Lost and Found. Curtis laughed. Harbor Light's Lost and Found box was a plastic container filled with umbrellas, sunglasses, and forgotten phone chargers. I'm not putting this beside somebody's baseball cap. Neither am I. Lillian pulled an envelope from a stack beside the printer. Write down when I found it. Curtis frowned. You serious? Yes. She wrote Table 7, 11:47 p.m. diamond ring found beneath booth. Then she added her name. Sign it. Curtis stared at her. Why, so there's a record? You think I'm stealing it? I think neither of us should have to prove later that we didn't. That silenced him. Curtis signed. Lillian placed the ring inside the envelope and sealed it. Then she signed across the flap. Your turn. Curtis reluctantly did the same. He looked at the envelope. You know what's funny? What that thing could probably pay your rent for a year. Lillian's eyes moved briefly toward her phone. The tuition message was still there. Then it was never my rent money. Outside, Vivian could not hear those words. But she saw enough. She saw Lillian enter the office holding the diamond. She saw Curtis examine it. She saw the envelope. She saw both of them sign it. Vivian should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt something more complicated. She had spent years believing pressure revealed what people really were. Raymond had taught her that. When his business decisions began collapsing, he had hidden the truth. He had told himself he was protecting their family. Vivian had eventually learned that fear could make decent people justify terrible choices. Now she had watched a woman who clearly needed something choose not to take what was available. And Vivian had still not walked through the door. Inside, Curtis locked the envelope in the office safe. "You really wouldn't have kept it?" "No, not even for 5 minutes." "What would 5 minutes change?" Curtis leaned against the desk. "You need money. I need my money." "There's a difference." "Yes." He shook his head. "You're too proud." "No, I just don't want to wake up wondering when somebody's going to knock on my door." Curtis laughed. "You think the universe gives points for honesty?" Lillian reached for the office door. "No." She paused. "I think my son does." Then she left. Vivian stepped away from the window before Lillian could notice her. She returned to the sedan. Her hand reached for the door handle. She could go inside. Identify the ring. Thank Lillian. Take it home. That was what any reasonable person would do, but Vivian remained beside the car. She remembered the expression on Lillian's face when she had checked her phone. Whatever message she had read mattered, and an uncomfortable question remained. Would Lillian still protect the ring tomorrow if nobody came back? Vivian disliked herself for wondering, but distrust had become a habit. She climbed into the sedan without starting it. Inside Harbor Light, Lillian finished mopping. At 12:19 a.m., she untied her apron. Before leaving, she opened her locker. The glass jar sat on the shelf. She took out the $6.58 Vivian had left as a tip. For a moment, Lillian held the bills beside the jar. Then she pushed them through the opening. $77.94, still nowhere near $486. But they belonged to her. She touched the masking tape. "One honest dollar at a time," she murmured. Harold passed behind her. "You talking to your money now, trying to encourage it? Tell it to reproduce." Lillian smiled. "I already tried." She closed the locker. Minutes later, she stepped into the rain and hurried toward the Malibu. Vivian watched from inside her sedan as Lillian's old car struggled to start. Once, twice. On the third attempt, the engine caught. The Malibu pulled away. Vivian remained in the parking lot. Her diamond was locked inside the diner. Her bare ring finger rested against the steering wheel. For 38 years, that ring had represented promises. Tonight, a waitress who desperately needed money had reminded Vivian what a promise was supposed to cost. But the test was not over. By noon the next day, Lillian would lose something she had worked 7 months to earn. And Vivian was about to witness the price of honesty when doing the right thing gave nothing back. The owner who didn't come back. At 8:12 the next morning, Lillian Sanchez unlocked the front door of Harbor Light Diner. She had slept less than 5 hours. The diamond ring was still inside the office safe. No one had called about it. Curtis arrived 20 minutes later carrying coffee. "Anybody come for Cinderella's jewelry? No. Maybe nobody will." Lillian ignored him and opened the reservation book from the previous night. Most Harbor Light customers simply walked in, but 3 tables had reservations. Lillian found their phone numbers and began calling. She never described the ring. "Did anyone in your party lose a personal item last night?" The first customer said no. The second had lost nothing. The third checked with his wife and called back 10 minutes later. Nothing. Curtis watched from behind the counter. "You're working harder to give away a diamond than some people work to find a job. It belongs to somebody. Then they'll come looking." Lillian glanced at the clock. 9:07 a.m. Less than 3 hours remained before her tuition deadline. Across the street, Vivian Whitmore sat beside the window of a small coffee shop. From there she could see Harbor Light's entrance. Her diamond was only 100 feet away. Yet she had deliberately left it there. The decision felt uglier in daylight. Vivian had built Whitmore Community Foods from one rented kitchen into a company supplying meals to schools, hospitals, and community programs across Maryland. She had negotiated contracts worth millions. She had employed hundreds of people. But success had not repaired what Raymond had broken. Years earlier, when one of his investments began failing, Raymond secretly moved money from their shared assets to keep it alive. Then he lied. Not once, repeatedly. He told himself he was protecting Vivian from worry. By the time she discovered the truth, the money mattered less than the deception. After Raymond died, Vivian became careful with everyone. Too careful. She tested loyalty, checked motives, expected hidden reasons behind generous gestures. And now she was doing it to a waitress she barely knew. Vivian watched through the coffee shop window as Lillian moved between customers. She should go across the street. Instead, she remained seated. At Harbor Light, Lillian checked her bank account during a short break. $312. That was everything she could safely access if she emptied part of her savings and delayed 2 bills. She still needed $174. Her phone showed 9:46. She called the school. Baltimore Community Career Center. "Hi, this is Lillian Sanchez. I'm enrolled in food service management." After being transferred twice, she reached the billing office. "I can pay $312 today," Lillian said. "Can I pay the rest Friday?" The woman on the phone sounded genuinely apologetic. "I'm sorry, Miss Sanchez. The system requires the full balance. I've already completed 7 months. I understand. Could I speak with someone about an extension? The deadline has already been extended." Lillian closed her eyes. "What happens at noon, your enrollment will be suspended. And next term you can reapply. Reapply. Start waiting again. Rearrange Jordan's schedule again. Ask Mrs. Carter for help again. Try to find morning classes that fit around diner shifts again." "Okay," Lillian said quietly. "I'm sorry. Thank you for checking." She ended the call. Harold stood near the kitchen doorway. He had heard enough. "How much short?" Lillian shook her head. "Don't. I asked a number. 174. Harold reached toward his pocket. Lillian immediately raised a hand. "No. I didn't even do anything. You were about to. I have some cash. And a mortgage. My mortgage is not your business." "Exactly," Harold sighed. "You are exhausting. So I've been told." He disappeared into the kitchen. Lillian looked toward the office. For the briefest moment she thought about the envelope inside the safe. $174. Compared with the ring's value, it was almost nothing. If someone sold a ring worth thousands who would notice $174, the thought lasted only seconds. But it existed. Lillian did not pretend otherwise. Integrity was easy when temptation was theoretical. This was different. Her future had a price now. Exactly $174. She looked away from the office. At 10:31, Curtis came over. "You know, if nobody claims that ring, it still isn't ours. I'm just saying, don't." Curtis lifted both hands. "Fine." Across the street, Vivian saw Lillian checking her phone repeatedly. At 11:03, Vivian finally left the coffee shop. She crossed halfway toward Harbor Light. Then she stopped. Through the diner window, she saw Lillian sitting alone in a booth during her break. Her phone lay on the table. A credit card sat beside it. Vivian could not see the numbers. She could see Lillian rubbing her forehead. Vivian suddenly understood that whatever problem Lillian had was happening now. She should have entered. Instead, old suspicion whispered one more question. Would desperation change her? Vivian hated the question. She hated herself more for waiting for the answer. At 11:42, Lillian opened the payment portal. Amount due $486. She entered $312. The system rejected the partial payment. Full balance required. She checked the time. 11:44. Jordan had once asked her why adults stared at phones when they were worried. "Because sometimes we're waiting for numbers to become different," she had told him. Now Lillian understood how ridiculous that sounded. Numbers did not become different because you needed them to. 11:51. A customer entered. Lillian put the phone down. Morning. Sit anywhere. The man chose the counter. She poured coffee. He ordered 2 eggs, toast, and bacon. 11:55. Lillian carried the ticket to the kitchen. Harold looked at the clock. Go make your call. There's nobody left to call. 11:57. Lillian returned to the booth. She refreshed the payment page. Nothing changed. 11:58. Her eyes drifted toward Curtis's office. Behind that door was a diamond worth more than she needed. Nobody had claimed it. Nobody except Lillian and Curtis knew it existed. And as far as Lillian knew, nobody. Nobody was watching. 11:59. Her finger hovered over the screen. She could call a pawn shop. She could ask Curtis to open the safe. She could tell herself she would repay it later. Then she imagined Jordan opening the glass jar. $1 honest at a time. Lillian locked her phone. 12:00. A new message appeared. Enrollment suspended, outstanding balance. She stared at it. 7 months of waking early. 7 months of rushing from class to Harbor Light. 7 months of notes, exams, and plans. Suspended. Lillian swallowed hard. No dramatic tears came. There was simply a heaviness behind her ribs. Lillian. The customer at the counter lifted his mug. Could I get more coffee? She stood. Of course. She picked up the pot and walked over. Sorry about that. No problem. She filled his cup. Outside, Vivian stood beneath the awning of the building across the street. She had seen Lillian look toward the office. She had seen the hesitation, and she had seen her walk away. Vivian suddenly felt ashamed. This was no longer about recovering a ring. She had watched a stranger lose something important simply because she wanted proof that goodness could survive pressure. Vivian crossed the street. This time she did not stop. The bell above Harbor Light's door rang. Lillian looked up. She recognized the woman from table 7 immediately. Vivian approached the counter. Good afternoon. Lillian managed a professional smile. Good afternoon. Black coffee again? No. Vivian glanced toward Curtis's office. I believe I left something here last night. Lillian's expression changed. What did you lose a ring? Lillian did not rush toward the office. Instead, she reached beneath the counter and pulled out a blank lost property form. I'll need you to describe it. Vivian stared at her. Even now, Lillian was protecting something that did not belong to her. Vivian slowly looked down at her bare left hand. For the first time in years, she understood that distrust could become its own kind of dishonesty. It could make you judge people for things they had never done. And before she left Harbor Light that afternoon, Vivian Whitmore would offer Lillian something worth far more than $486. But Lillian's answer would surprise her all over again. What money couldn't fix, Lillian Sanchez stood behind the counter with the lost property form between her hands. What does the ring look like? Vivian Whitmore glanced toward Curtis's office. A platinum band, oval-cut diamond, small stones along both sides. Lillian waited. Vivian understood. There's a scratch inside the band near the setting, and an engraving. What does it say? Vivian hesitated. R.W. to V.W. always. June 14th, 1988. Lillian nodded. That matches. She called Curtis from the office. When he appeared, Lillian asked him to open the safe. Curtis brought out the sealed envelope, and Vivian watched Lillian inspect both signatures across the flap before opening it. The diamond fell gently into Lillian's palm. For a second, Vivian saw her look at it. No longing this time, only recognition. Lillian extended her hand. I'm glad you came back. Vivian took the ring. The diamond felt strangely heavy. You found it under table 7. When last night? Vivian already knew the answer, but she asked anyway. Was anyone else there? Mr. Bennett was in the office. Harold was in the kitchen. But when you actually found it? Lillian looked puzzled. No. Vivian lowered her eyes. So you were alone. as far as I knew. The words landed harder than Lillian intended. Vivian slipped the ring into her purse instead of putting it on. Do you know what it's worth, number? More than $20,000. Curtis, standing nearby, nearly choked on his coffee. Lillian's eyebrows lifted. That explains why you came back in the rain. Vivian almost smiled. Then she reached into her purse and removed a cream-colored envelope. I'd like you to take this. Lillian looked at it. What is it a thank you? I don't need one. You don't even know what's inside. That's why I don't need it. Vivian placed the envelope on the counter. You returned something extremely valuable. It belonged to you. That doesn't make what you did ordinary. It should. Curtis turned toward Lillian, as if she had lost her mind. Vivian pushed the envelope closer. There's $500 inside. Lillian's breath caught. $500. $14 more than the tuition payment she had missed. For one dangerous second, the timing felt almost cruel. Yesterday, that money could have kept her enrolled. Now the deadline had passed. She looked at the envelope again. Vivian noticed. You need it. Lillian's expression tightened. Most people do. I can make it 1,000. Curtis stared openly now. Lillian shook her head. No, ma'am. Why? Because returning your property wasn't a service I performed for a fee. It's gratitude. I understand. And I appreciate it. Then take it. Lillian looked directly at Vivian. If I take money because I did what I was supposed to do, then next time I do the right thing, part of me might start wondering what I'm getting for it. Vivian had no immediate answer. Curtis did. That is the dumbest thing I've heard all week. Lillian looked at him. Nobody asked you. Vivian almost laughed, but stopped herself. You're very stubborn, so my son tells me. You have a son, Jordan, 11. Vivian glanced at the envelope. Then take it for him. Something changed in Lillian's face. Not anger, exactly. A boundary. My son needs to see me earn what we have more than he needs $500 he didn't ask for. Vivian slowly pulled the envelope back. She had spent decades around executives who negotiated over every advantage available. Yet here was a woman earning waitress wages, refusing money she badly needed. Vivian remembered watching through the window the night before. She felt ashamed again. What would actually help you? She asked. Lillian considered the question. A better shift, that's all. That's all. A better shift becomes better hours. Better hours mean I can finish school. Finishing school means I can qualify for something better. You're studying, I was. The final word caught Vivian's attention. Was Lillian immediately regretted saying it? It's nothing. What happened? Life happened. Vivian waited. Lillian did not elaborate. She would not turn her hardship into a sales pitch. Finally, she said, I'm trying to move into food service management. Vivian looked toward the kitchen. Why management? Because this place throws away enough food every week to pay somebody's rent. Curtis frowned. Lillian. She ignored him. Because schedules are built around convenience instead of retention. Because produce gets delivered and nobody rotates inventory. Because people think losing $10 here and $20 there doesn't matter. Vivian's attention sharpened. You track that Lillian realized she had said too much. Sometimes. Curtis stepped in. She's taking some classes. She thinks she's a consultant now. Lillian's jaw tightened. Vivian noticed. But she did not challenge Curtis. Not yet. Instead, she asked Lillian, what time does your shift end? Why curiosity? 3. Vivian nodded. Then she picked up her purse. Thank you for returning the ring. You're welcome. Vivian started toward the door. Curtis waited until she was gone. Then he turned on Lillian. $500. Lillian began wiping the counter. I heard. Then she offered more. I heard that too. You just lost your school thing because you needed money. Lillian stopped wiping. How do you know that you've been staring at your phone all morning? She said nothing. Curtis shook his head. You could have taken the 1,000 and then paid your bills. And then, what do you mean, and then next month comes? Curtis stared at her. $1,000 is still $1,000. Yes. Lillian folded the cloth. But I don't need somebody to reward me for being honest. I need a way to earn more than I earn here. Curtis laughed. Good luck. The words hurt more than she wanted them to. Because maybe he was right. At 3:17, Lillian left Harbor Light. No limousine waited. No miraculous scholarship appeared. No stranger handed her a new life. She drove home in the Malibu, which stalled once at a traffic light. That evening, Jordan sat at the kitchen table doing homework when Lillian came in. He looked up immediately. You paid the school? Lillian put down her bag. No. Jordan stopped writing. What happens? I have to wait until the next term. But you were almost done, I know. Can't they just let you finish? That's not how it works. Jordan stared at his math worksheet. That's stupid. Probably. He looked at her. Are you sad? Lillian removed her coat. A little. You look more than a little. She sat across from him. Okay. More than a little. Jordan disappeared into her bedroom. He returned carrying the glass jar. Before Lillian could stop him, he removed the lid and poured everything onto the table. Bills, quarters, dimes, nickels. Jordan, we can use this. He began counting. Lillian watched him make stacks. Finally, he looked up. $77.94. I know. We can give them this now and the rest later. The deadline passed. Then call them. I already did. Jordan pushed the money toward her anyway. Take it. Lillian looked at the pile. That money had come from months of small choices. Tips she could have spent. Coins Jordan could have used. Tiny pieces of tomorrow. She pushed it back. No. Why not? Because we don't empty tomorrow to survive tonight. Jordan frowned. That sounds like something old people say. Lillian laughed. Probably. He slowly returned the money to the jar. Then he asked, So what now? Lillian looked at the notebook sticking from her work bag. For months she had filled it with observations no one requested. Food waste, inventory errors, scheduling problems, ideas Curtis dismissed. Maybe the certificate had been one path. That did not mean it was the only path. I keep going, she said. Jordan nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense. Later that night, after he went to bed, Lillian sat at the kitchen table and opened the notebook. She turned to a page filled with numbers. Bread waste, produce spoilage, unused soup, weekly estimated loss. She began calculating. Across Baltimore, Vivian Whitmore sat in the back seat of her sedan outside her company headquarters. The diamond ring rested inside her purse. She had not put it back on. She was thinking about something else. Not the ring. Not the $1,000 Lillian refused. She was thinking about the waitress saying Harbor Light threw away enough food to pay someone's rent. Vivian had heard that tone before. Not from waitresses. From operations managers. From people who saw systems where everyone else saw routine. She took out her phone. Cancel my first meeting tomorrow, she told her assistant. Is everything all right? Yes. Vivian looked at the diamond in her palm. I'm going back to a diner. This time she would not return to test Lillian Sanchez. She would return because she had finally realized the ring was not the most valuable thing she had found at table 7. The notebook. In her apron, Vivian Whitmore returned to Harbor Light Diner at 10:18 the next morning. This time there was no rain, there was no missing diamond, and there was no test. Lillian Sanchez was standing near the kitchen entrance, counting slices of bread. Vivian stopped just inside the door. Lillian had not noticed her yet. On the counter sat 3 plastic baskets containing bread left from the breakfast rush. Lillian counted each untouched slice before writing something in the small notebook she always carried in her apron. Harold Mitchell passed behind her with a tray. 23:27. That bad yesterday was 31. Improvement. 4 slices isn't a revolution. Harold smiled. Gotta start somewhere. Lillian closed the notebook. Only then did she notice Vivian. War table 7, Vivian smiled faintly. Apparently I'm becoming predictable. Black coffee, please. Lillian led her to the same booth. The diamond was nowhere on Vivian's hand. Lillian noticed, but said nothing. She brought coffee. Vivian looked toward the notebook sticking from Lillian's apron. What were you counting bread? I gathered that. Lillian waited. Why? Because we throw too much away. Vivian gestured toward the opposite seat. Do you have 5 minutes? I'm working. I can order something. That doesn't buy 5 minutes. Vivian smiled. I like that answer. Lillian glanced around. The morning rush had ended. I have 3. She sat. Vivian pointed at the notebook. Show me. Lillian hesitated. It's mostly numbers. I like numbers. She removed the notebook and placed it on the table. The cover was bent. Several pages were stained with coffee. Vivian opened it. What she found surprised her. There were dates, quantities, and estimates. Bread discarded. Produce spoiled. Soup remaining after closing. Incorrect orders. Average plate waste. Besides several entries, Lillian had calculated approximate costs. You did all this yourself, mostly. Why? Lillian shrugged. Because nobody else was doing it. Vivian turned another page. A handwritten heading read, First in, first out produce. Below it was a simple plan for labeling deliveries. Another page contained a proposal for adjusting soup batches based on weekday sales. Another showed an idea for donating safe surplus food. Vivian looked up. You've been tracking this for how long? About 4 months. Does Curtis know? Lillian gave her a look. That means yes. He knows. And he told me customers don't care what happens to bread after they leave. That wasn't my question. Lillian leaned back. I gave him suggestions. He wasn't interested. From behind the counter, Curtis noticed them talking. His expression hardened. Lillian saw him. My 3 minutes are probably finished. Vivian closed the notebook. What do you think this diner loses every week? Food only, yes. Between $400 and $600. Vivian raised an eyebrow. That much? Probably more. How Lillian pointed toward the kitchen. Too much prep on slow weekdays. Bad rotation. Portions aren't consistent. Fresh produce gets put in front of older stock. And we treat every night like Saturday. Vivian listened without interrupting. Lillian continued. Last Tuesday, Harold made enough soup for 90 servings. How many did you sell? 48. What happened to the rest? Some was stored, some couldn't be. And you think you can reduce that, yes? How much? Lillian paused. If people actually followed the system, 15% easily. Maybe 18. Vivian had expected vague ambition. Instead, she was hearing operational thinking. Why food management? Lillian glanced toward the kitchen. Because I'm tired of watching people at the bottom get blamed for problems created at the top. Vivian said nothing. Lillian continued more quietly. A waitress gets blamed because service is slow. But nobody asks whether the kitchen was understaffed. A cook gets blamed for waste, but nobody checks ordering. Somebody gets scheduled 6 days straight, and then management acts surprised when they quit. You think you can do better. I think I can learn to. That answer interested Vivian more than confidence would have. Not I can fix everything. I can learn. Curtis approached. Lillian Booth 3 needs cleaning. I'll get it. His eyes shifted toward Vivian. Everything okay, ma'am? Perfectly. Curtis looked at the notebook. Lillian likes doing homework on company time. Lillian's expression tightened. I'm on break. Curtis gave a thin smile. Break's over. Lillian stood. Vivian watched her slip the notebook into her apron. Thank you for the coffee. Lillian nodded. Then she went to clear booth 3. Curtis remained. You know she returned your ring, right? Yes. She's a good person. Vivian looked at him. That sounded almost like a warning. Curtis laughed awkwardly. No, just saying she gets ideas. What kind she thinks because she's taking classes she understands management. Vivian glanced toward Lillian. She was scraping plates into a trash bin. Before throwing away 2 untouched dinner rolls, she stopped, looked at them, then recorded something in the notebook. What classes? Some food service certificate. Curtis shrugged, was taking them anyway. Vivian turned back. Couldn't make the payment. Now several things made sense. The phone, the expression, the deadline, the hesitation Vivian had watched through the window. How much? Curtis shrugged again. 400 or 500, I think. Vivian became still. The envelope she had offered contained $500. Lillian had lost her enrollment hours before Vivian offered almost exactly what she needed. And she had still refused. Vivian felt something uncomfortable tighten in her chest. Curtis leaned closer. I offered her more shifts. She thinks that certificate is going to change her life. Vivian looked directly at him. Maybe it will. Curtis laughed. People like Lillian always think the next thing is going to fix everything. Vivian's expression cooled. People like Lillian Curtis realized too late what he had said. I just mean I know what you meant. Vivian stood. She left money for the coffee and walked toward the counter. Lillian was carrying plates toward the kitchen. Lillian. She stopped. Yes. Vivian took a business card from her purse. She placed it on the counter. Lillian read the name. Vivian Whitmore, founder and chair Whitmore Community Foods. Lillian looked up. You own Whitmore Foods. I founded it. The company name was familiar. Whitmore supplied meals to several Baltimore hospitals and public school programs. Lillian looked again at the card. Why didn't you tell me? You never asked. That's fair. Vivian nodded toward the notebook. I want to see what you can do with those ideas. Lillian's eyes narrowed slightly. Is this because of the ring? The ring is why I noticed you. Vivian paused. The notebook is why I came back. That distinction mattered. Lillian looked down at the card. What are you offering? Nothing yet. That surprised her. Vivian continued. We have a small commercial kitchen in East Baltimore. It has missed its food cost targets for 6 consecutive months. You want me to fix it? I want you to tell me how you would. Lillian almost laughed. I'm a waitress. You were a waitress yesterday, too. That didn't stop you from identifying problems in this diner. I don't have my certification, then don't pretend you do. Vivian's tone was firm, but not cruel. Use what you know. Research what you don't. Lillian studied her. And if the proposal is bad, then it's bad. No job? No job. No reward for returning the ring? No. For the first time, Lillian smiled. Good. I thought you might say that. She pushed the business card closer. If you want a door opened, bring me something worth opening it for. Then she left. Lillian stood at the counter holding the card. Curtis appeared beside her. What was that nothing? He reached for the card. Lillian moved it away. Doesn't look like nothing. She slipped it into her apron beside the notebook. For the rest of the shift, she could feel both objects there. One represented everything she had observed. The other represented somewhere those observations might finally matter. That evening, Lillian placed the business card on the kitchen table at home. Jordan read it. Founder and chair, apparently. Is that important? Usually. Is she giving you a job? No. Jordan frowned. Then why are you smiling? Lillian opened her notebook. Because she's letting me earn one. At 9:43 p.m., she pulled out her old laptop. The hinge was cracked, and 3 keys had lost their letters. Jordan sat beside her doing homework. Lillian opened a blank document. At the top, she typed, 30-day food waste reduction plan. She stared at the empty page. The certificate was gone for now. The 486ers was still beyond her reach. Nothing about her life had suddenly become easy, but for the first time in months, Lillian was not thinking about what she lacked. She was thinking about what she knew and what she could prove. She opened her notebook to the first page. Then she began to write. No free door. At 1:36 a.m., Lillian Sanchez was still sitting at the kitchen table. Jordan had fallen asleep on the sofa with a science book open across his chest. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the clicking of Lillian's old laptop. On the screen were 3 words she had rewritten 6 times: reduce, track, redistribute. She wanted Vivian Whitmore to see more than enthusiasm. She needed numbers. Lillian opened her notebook. Monday, 31 slices bread discarded. Tuesday, 42. Wednesday, 26. She entered every number she had collected. Then she calculated costs. Bread seemed insignificant until multiplied across weeks. Produce was worse. Soup was unpredictable. Oversized portions created another category of waste. By 2:11 a.m., Lillian estimated Harbor Light was losing nearly $2,000 each month through preventable food waste. She stared at the number. That can't be right. She calculated again. It was close. Jordan stirred on the sofa. Mom, go back to sleep. What time is it too late for you? He sat up and rubbed his eyes. You're still doing the job thing. It's not a job yet. Jordan looked at the laptop. You have a lot of numbers. Numbers are easier than people. Mr. Dawson says numbers don't lie. Your teacher is optimistic. Jordan smiled sleepily. Lillian closed the laptop halfway. Bed. You too soon. That means no. It means bed, Jordan. He shuffled toward his room. Before closing the door, he looked back. $1 honest at a time. Lillian smiled, 1 homework assignment at a time. The door closed. She reopened the laptop. The next morning, Lillian arrived at Harbor Light, exhausted but focused. She needed more than estimates. She needed actual purchasing data. Harold Mitchell was chopping onions when she approached him. Do we keep old supplier invoices? Harold looked sideways at her. Why? I need historical prices. For your proposal, Lillian stopped. How do you know about that? This kitchen has walls, not secrets. She lowered her voice. Do we have them, Curtis does? That was a problem. At 10:20, she entered Curtis's office. He barely looked up. What can I see the produce invoices from the last 3 months? No. Why? Because they're company records. I'm trying to compare waste against purchase costs. Curtis finally looked at her. For Vivian Whitmore? Lillian said nothing. He leaned back. I knew it. Knew what you think that woman's going to pull you out of here because you returned some jewelry. She asked for a proposal. And you think that makes you management? No. Lillian kept her voice calm. It makes me somebody writing a proposal. Curtis laughed. You're scheduled here to serve tables. And I do. Then serve them. Lillian turned toward the door. Lillian. She stopped. Curtis picked up the schedule. I need someone Friday night. I have Jordan. You want hours or not? I can't Friday. Curtis took a pen. Then I'll give the shift to somebody who wants to work. The threat was clear. Lillian looked at him. Are you cutting my hours because I'm working on a proposal I'm scheduling according to availability? They both knew that was not true, but proving it was another matter. Lillian left. By the end of the day, next week's schedule was posted. 23 hours. She normally worked 34. 11 hours gone. Lillian calculated the missing wages before she reached her car. Approximately $126 before tips. Her stomach tightened. For a moment, Vivian's business card felt less like opportunity and more like danger. What if she failed? She could lose hours at Harbor Light and still receive nothing from Whitmore Foods. That night, Lillian almost closed the laptop without working. Jordan was eating macaroni at the table. You quitting? She looked at him. What the job thing? No, you closed the computer. I'm tired. Jordan nodded. Then he continued eating. After a moment, he said, You always tell me tired isn't the same as done. Lillian stared at him. I need to stop talking so much. Jordan grinned. She reopened the laptop, but she still lacked real invoice data. The next afternoon, Harold found her near the kitchen freezer. He handed her a brown grocery bag. "What's this? Definitely not company records." Lillian opened it. Inside were photocopies of old invoices, produce, bread, dairy, meat, nearly 4 months of purchasing records. Her eyes widened. "Harold, you didn't get these from me. Where did you get them? I've been cooking here 16 years. You think Curtis is the only person who knows where paperwork goes?" Lillian flipped through the pages. "This is exactly what I need, I know. Why are you helping me?" Harold wiped his hands on his apron. "When I was 32, I got accepted into a culinary program in Philadelphia." Lillian had never heard this. "What happened? My mother got sick." "I'm sorry. I stayed. Took care of her. Told myself I'd apply again." He looked toward the grill. "I never did." There was no bitterness in his voice. That made it sadder. "You regret it?" "Some days." Harold nodded toward the invoices. "I don't want to watch somebody else decide not to try because staying put feels safer." Lillian swallowed. "I can't pay you back for this. I didn't ask you to." He returned to the kitchen. The words stayed with her. That night the proposal changed. With actual purchase prices, Lillian recalculated everything. Estimated avoidable monthly waste, $1,742. She created a simple rotation system. Red label use today. Yellow use within 48 hours. Green new inventory. She proposed smaller soup batches Monday through Thursday with adjustments based on sales patterns. She added portion control training. Then she built the part she cared about most. Food that remained safe but could not be sold the following day would be recorded, cooled, properly packaged, and transferred to a local food pantry under an approved donation partnership. Waste less, feed more. At 12:47 a.m., Lillian reached the financial projection. If the system reduced avoidable waste by 18%, the savings would exceed the cost of implementation within weeks. But she found a problem. Her data came from Harbor Light, a diner. Whitmore Foods operated commercial kitchens, different scale, different regulations, different staffing. For 20 minutes, Lillian stared at the flaw. She could hide it. Present the percentages as broadly applicable. Make herself sound more certain than she was. Instead, she created a section titled Limitations. She explained exactly what she did not know. Then, beneath it, 30-day pilot required. At 2:26 a.m., the laptop froze. No, the screen went black. Lillian pressed the power button. Nothing. She stared at it in disbelief. Then she noticed the charging cable had slipped loose. She plugged it back in. The laptop restarted. The document recovered. Lillian laughed so loudly she covered her mouth to avoid waking Jordan. At 2:54, she printed the proposal using the small printer beside the refrigerator. 14 pages. Jordan appeared in the hallway. "You're still awake, technically." He came closer. "Is that it? I think so." He picked up the final page. "What does this mean?" He pointed to the phrase, "waste less, feed more." "It means if a kitchen pays attention, it can save money without treating people like numbers." Jordan nodded, as though considering an important business principle. "Sounds good. High praise." He noticed the time. "Mom, what it's after 3. Lillian looked. 3:08 a.m. She picked up a blue pen. At the bottom of the final page, beneath the printed conclusion, she wrote by hand, "Waste less. Feed more." Then she signed Lillian Sanchez. Jordan looked at the signature. "You nervous, very? What if she says no?" Lillian stacked the pages carefully. "Then I'll know I tried. And if she says yes," Lillian looked at Vivian's business card lying beside the glass tip jar. For years, every solution had seemed to require money she did not have. This was different. The door Vivian had offered could not be purchased. Lillian had to walk toward it, carrying the only things she could truly claim as hers: her observations, her work, her ideas, and her name. She opened her email, attached the proposal, typed a short message, then stopped with the cursor over send. Jordan stood beside her. "Well?" Lillian took a breath. No free door. She clicked. The message disappeared. Across the city, Vivian Whitmore's phone lit up on her bedside table. Subject, 30-day food waste reduction proposal, Lillian Sanchez. Vivian would read it at 6:14 that morning. And before breakfast was over, 3 executives at Whitmore Community Foods would be asking the same question. Who exactly was Lillian Sanchez? 12 minutes in the boardroom. At 8:52 a.m., the following Tuesday, Lillian Sanchez stood outside the headquarters of Whitmore Community Foods and considered turning around. The building was all glass, steel, and polished stone. Lillian looked down at herself. Her navy blazer had cost $18 at a thrift store. One sleeve was slightly longer than the other. Her black shoes were 4 years old, but she had polished them until they shone. Inside her bag were 3 printed copies of her proposal. Her phone vibrated. "Jordan," she answered. "You there, I'm outside. You going in?" That was the plan. Then why are you still outside? Lillian smiled. "How do you know I'm outside?" "Because when you're nervous, you stall. I do not. You reorganized the refrigerator before your last exam. That refrigerator needed help. Go inside, Mom." Lillian looked through the glass doors. What if they say no? Then they say no. He made it sound simple. And if I embarrass myself, I'll still need dinner. She laughed, very supportive. "I try." Lillian ended the call and entered the building. At reception, she gave her name. The receptionist checked a tablet. "Ms. Whitmore is expecting you." Those words made everything suddenly real. A few minutes later, an assistant escorted Lillian upstairs. The conference room was larger than her apartment's living room. 6 people sat around a long table. Vivian Whitmore was among them. Lillian had expected Vivian to lead the meeting. She didn't. A man in a gray suit stood. "Ms. Sanchez, I'm Daniel Foster, Chief Operating Officer." They shook hands. "This is Renee Parker, Regional Operations Supervisor." Renee gave Lillian a brief nod. The others introduced themselves. Finance, procurement, compliance, human resources. Lillian sat at the far end. Daniel opened her proposal. "Ms. Whitmore tells us you currently work at a diner?" "Yes." "As a waitress?" "Yes." Renee leaned back. "And your management certification not completed." Why, Lillian could have explained everything. The car repair, the rent increase, the missing $486, the diamond. She chose the shortest truth. "I couldn't make the final payment." Renee glanced toward Vivian. Lillian saw it. There it was. The assumption. Vivian Whitmore had brought a struggling waitress into a corporate boardroom because she felt sorry for her. Vivian noticed the look too, but she said nothing. Daniel folded his hands. "You have 12 minutes. Lillian blinked. 12? Convince us the proposal is worth testing. No encouragement came from Vivian. For a moment, Lillian felt abandoned. Then she understood. This was what she had asked for. No reward, no rescue, a chance. She stood. Her first sentence came out too quickly. Then the second. She stopped. "Sorry." Nobody spoke. Lillian took one breath. She thought about Harbor Light, about bread in trash bags, about Harold making 90 servings of soup when 48 sold. That was territory she understood. She began again. Most food waste doesn't look expensive when it happens. She placed one page in front of the executives. A few rolls, half a pan of soup, produce that sits 1 day too long, a portion that's 2 ounces larger than the standard. She looked around the table. But small waste repeated every day becomes a system. Now her voice steadied. She explained her tracking method. She described inventory rotation, smaller production batches, portion controls, donation partnerships. Renee interrupted. "You're using data from one independent diner." "Yes." "Whitmore operates at a completely different scale." "Yes." "Then why should these percentages mean anything to us?" Lillian paused. "Some of them shouldn't." Renee raised an eyebrow. Lillian continued. The principals transfer. The exact percentages may not. You projected 18%. As a pilot target, not a guaranteed result. Renee flipped through the proposal. That distinction could be clearer. You're right. The room went quiet. Lillian wrote something on her copy. Renee looked surprised. You're changing your proposal during the presentation. I'm correcting it. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Lillian continued. I don't know your kitchens yet. Anyone who promises 18% before seeing your actual workflow is guessing. Vivian watched without expression, but beneath the table she relaxed her hand. Lillian moved to the next section. She spoke about employees. If workers think waste tracking exists to punish them, they'll hide waste. Daniel nodded. So the first question shouldn't be, who threw this away? It should be, why did we prepare too much? For the first time, the finance director began taking notes. Lillian explained that cooks and dishwashers often saw operational problems before managers because they physically handled the consequences. People closest to the problem usually know something about it, she said. They're just rarely asked. Vivian looked at her. That sentence applied to more than kitchens. At 11 minutes and 40 seconds, Lillian reached the final page. Waste less? Feed more, she said. She closed the folder. Daniel checked the clock. 11 minutes, 53. Lillian sat down. Her hands were trembling beneath the table. The executives began asking questions. Some she answered easily. Others she couldn't. When procurement asked about regional vendor contract restrictions, she admitted she had no experience with them. When compliance raised donation liability requirements, Lillian said she would need guidance. She refused to disguise ignorance as confidence. 20 minutes later, Daniel closed the folder. Thank you, Miss Sanchez. Lillian looked toward Vivian. Vivian gave her nothing. No smile, no reassurance. Thank you for your time, Lillian said. She gathered her papers and left. In the elevator, she finally exhaled. That was terrible, she whispered. The elevator doors opened. Her phone rang before she reached the lobby. Unknown number. Hello, Ms. Sanchez. It was Daniel Foster. Yes, could you come back upstairs? Her stomach dropped. Did I forget something? Not exactly. 10 minutes later, Lillian was sitting in the same conference room. This time only Daniel, Renee, and Vivian remained. Daniel spoke first. We have a production kitchen in East Baltimore that has missed its food cost targets for 6 consecutive months. Lillian listened. We'd like to offer you a 30-day trial as an entry-level operations supervisor. She stared at him. You want me to run the pilot under regional supervision? Lillian glanced at Renee. Renee's expression made it clear that supervision would be very real. What happens after 30 days? Daniel answered plainly. If the numbers don't improve, the assignment ends. And if they do, we discuss something permanent. The salary was better than Harbor Light. Not dramatically. Enough to matter. There was no corner office, no giant check, no guarantee. Exactly what Lillian wanted. A measurable chance. When would I start Monday? Lillian nodded slowly. I'll do it. After the others left, Vivian remained. Lillian turned toward her. You didn't help me in there. No, I thought you might. I know. Lillian studied her. Vivian walked toward the window. Several people in that room knew about the ring. Lillian's expression changed. I wish they didn't. So do I. It made them wonder whether you were here because I felt indebted to you. And am I? Vivian turned. The ring got my attention. She tapped Lillian's proposal. Your work got you the job. Lillian looked at those 14 pages. The worn notebook. The corrections she had made during the meeting. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe the opportunity belonged to her. Not to the diamond, not to Vivian, to her. That evening, Jordan was waiting when she came home. Well, Lillian kept her face serious. They offered me 30 days. Jordan stared. Is that good? I think so. His face exploded into a grin. You got the job. I got 30 days. Same thing. Very much not the same thing. He hugged her anyway. Behind him, on the kitchen counter, sat the glass jar. $1 honest at a time. Lillian looked at it over Jordan's shoulder. The jar was still nearly empty. Her tuition was still unpaid. Her car was still unreliable. Nothing had magically disappeared. But Monday morning she would walk into a commercial kitchen not carrying plates for someone else's system. She would be responsible for improving it. 30 days, one opportunity. And Lillian had no idea that the hardest test of her honesty was still ahead. This time there would be no diamond ring. There would only be a mistake, a set of numbers, and a choice nobody expected her to admit. 30 days. At 5:27 a.m. on Monday, Lillian Sanchez stood outside Whitmore Community Foods' East Baltimore kitchen wearing a new ID badge. Operations Supervisor Temporary. The final word mattered. 30 days. That was all she had. Inside, stainless steel tables stretched beneath bright industrial lights. Refrigerators hummed along the walls. By 7 o'clock, hundreds of meals would be prepared for 2 clinics and 3 community programs. Renee Parker met her near the loading dock. You're early. So are you. I work here. Lillian smiled. For 30 days, so do I. Renee did not smile back. She handed Lillian a clipboard. Inventory starts at 5:30. By 6, Lillian understood why the kitchen was missing its targets. The problem was not one dramatic failure, it was 20 small ones. Cases were opened before older stock was finished. Portion sizes changed depending on who worked the line. Production numbers were based on outdated averages. Damaged produce was recorded inconsistently. Lillian started asking questions. A cook named Marcus told her Monday orders were always too high. A dishwasher named Keisha pointed out that untouched packaged items were sometimes discarded because nobody knew where to record them. Instead of arriving with new rules, Lillian wrote everything down. Renee watched from across the kitchen. By the 3rd day, she finally confronted her. You planning to supervise anyone? I am. You've spent 3 days asking employees what they think. They work with the system every day. They also make the mistakes. Sometimes. Renee crossed her arms. Vivian may be impressed by you, but this isn't a diner. I know, then stop acting like a waitress. Lillian looked at her. Being a waitress taught me to notice what happens when management doesn't. Renee's expression hardened. You think I'm bad management? I think the waste numbers are bad. Then Lillian returned to work. The first week produced only modest results. Waste dropped 4%. The second week, Lillian introduced colored inventory labels. Red meant use first. Yellow meant 48 hours. Green meant newest stock. She reduced several production batches and required unused food to be recorded by reason instead of simply weighed at closing. Overproduction, spoilage, incorrect portion, damaged product. For the first time, the kitchen could see where the losses came from. By day 12, waste was down 9%. Renee stopped calling Lillian the diner waitress, not because she suddenly liked her, because the numbers were becoming difficult to dismiss. Lillian also worked beside the staff. When a dishwasher called out, she helped clear trays. When produce arrived at 5:15 a.m., she helped inspect it. She learned names. She listened. Slowly, employees stopped seeing her clipboard as a threat. Waste less, Keisha said one afternoon while labeling containers. Marcus answered from the prep station, feed more. The phrase had caught on. Lillian smiled. For the first time, she thought the 30 days might actually work. Then came day 24. At 6:02 a.m., a refrigerated shipment arrived containing dairy vegetables and prepared proteins. Lillian signed the receiving sheet after a quick inspection. 40 minutes later, Marcus opened one of the lower boxes. Lillian, something in his voice made her turn. Several packages were warm. They checked another box. Same problem. Renee arrived with a thermometer. The temperature was above the safe limit. How long was this shipment unrefrigerated? Lillian asked. The driver checked his paperwork. It shouldn't have been. That's not an answer. They inspected the remaining cases. A significant portion had to be rejected. The replacement shipment would not arrive until afternoon. The kitchen missed part of its production target. By closing, hundreds of dollars in product had been documented as loss. Lillian stared at the receiving form. Her signature was at the bottom. She had inspected the shipment, but she had not temperature-checked every section before accepting it. Renee placed the report beside her. This destroys the week. Lillian knew. Their waste reduction had been approaching 17%. With the rejected shipment included, the number would drop sharply. Her 30-day review was 6 days away. Renee sat opposite her. The supplier caused the refrigeration problem. I signed for it. You checked the top cases. I should have checked the whole shipment. Renee tapped the spreadsheet. If we categorize the rejected product as vendor loss, it doesn't hit operational waste. Lillian looked at her. Is that accurate? Technically, the vendor is responsible, but our receiving process failed too. Renee said nothing. Lillian understood the temptation immediately. No stolen diamond, no envelope. Just a category on a spreadsheet. Change one line and her pilot remained successful. Nobody outside the kitchen would know. She thought about table 7. Then about Jordan's jar. Integrity, she realized, rarely announced itself with something as obvious as a diamond. Usually it looked like this. A number, a signature, a mistake that could quietly belong to somebody else. Lillian opened the report. She classified the vendor failure appropriately. Then, underneath it, she added, receiving control failure, accepted without complete temperature verification. Responsible supervisor, Lillian Sanchez. Renee stared at the screen. You understand Vivian will see that she should. You could lose the position, I know. You're really going to risk 30 days over one line? Lillian looked at her. No. She clicked save. I'm protecting 30 days with one line. That evening, Lillian emailed the complete report to regional operations. No explanation designed to protect herself. No excuse. Only the facts and a revised receiving procedure requiring temperature checks from multiple sections of every refrigerated shipment. At 8:14 p.m., Vivian Whitmore opened the report. She read the loss figure. Then she saw Lillian's name. Vivian leaned back. Once Lillian had returned a diamond when she believed nobody was watching. Now she had reported a mistake when she knew everyone important would be watching. Vivian closed the document. 6 days remained, and when the 30-day numbers were finally placed on the boardroom table, Lillian would discover whether honesty had cost her the opportunity she had fought so hard to earn. The story behind the diamond. On the morning after Lillian submitted the report, Vivian Whitmore sent her a short message. Coffee. 4:30 p.m. My office. Nothing else. For the rest of the day, Lillian tried not to interpret it. She failed. By 4:28, she was sitting across from Vivian in a quiet office overlooking Baltimore. The diamond ring lay on the desk between them. Lillian noticed it immediately. You still haven't put it back on? No. Vivian poured coffee into 2 cups. I read your report. Lillian nodded. I figured. You accepted the shipment without completing the temperature checks. Yes. You could have classified the entire loss as vendor responsibility. Yes. Renee suggested that Lillian hesitated. I made the decision, not Renee. Vivian noticed what Lillian had done. Even while admitting her own mistake, she refused to throw someone else beneath it. Vivian pushed a cup toward her. You're not here because of the shipment. Lillian frowned. Then why am I here? Because I owe you an apology. That was not what Lillian expected. Vivian looked at the diamond. My husband's name was Raymond. For the next few minutes, she spoke without the authority Lillian had seen in the boardroom. Raymond and Vivian had met when they were 23. They had built Whitmore Community Foods from a rented kitchen, 2 delivery vans, and more confidence than money. For years, Raymond handled expansion, while Vivian managed operations. They trusted each other completely, or Vivian believed they did. Then one of Raymond's private investments began failing. He thought he could fix it before I found out, Vivian said. She looked toward the window. He moved money, covered losses, changed records. Lillian said nothing. When I asked him directly, he lied. Vivian touched the ring. The money hurt. The lie changed everything. Eventually, Raymond confessed. They stayed married. They tried to rebuild. Some days were good, some were not. Then Raymond became ill. Cancer moved faster than forgiveness. He died before we finished repairing what he broke. Vivian said. Lillian looked at the ring differently now. He gave you that on our 20th anniversary. Vivian nodded. For years I couldn't decide whether it represented the man I loved or the man who betrayed my trust. That's why you were going to sell it. Vivian looked surprised. You noticed. You were like it was hurting you. A sad smile crossed Vivian's face. Yes. She told Lillian about the jeweler appointment. Then she reached the part she had avoided. When I realized the ring was missing, I came back to Harbor Light. I know. No, you don't. Lillian waited. I was outside when you found it. Silence filled the office. Vivian continued. I saw you pick it up. Lillian's face changed. You were watching me. Yes. You could have walked inside. Yes. But you did. No. Why Vivian had prepared explanations. Raymond, betrayal, distrust, experience. Suddenly, all of them sounded like excuses. I wanted to see what you would do. Lillian stared at her. The ring wasn't accidentally left with me overnight. The loss was accidental. Staying outside wasn't. And the next morning, Vivian looked down. I waited. Lillian stood. Vivian did not stop her. So while I was calling customers and trying to find the owner, you were watching. Yes. You saw me lose my enrollment. I didn't understand what was happening until later, but you knew something was wrong. Yes. Lillian's voice remained controlled, which made it sharper. You turned me into a test. Vivian swallowed. Yes. Because I'm a waitress. No, because you thought somebody who needed money might steal from you. Vivian had no honest defense. Yes. Lillian looked toward the door. I should go. Lillian. She stopped. Vivian stood. What I did was wrong. Lillian turned back. Vivian did not say she had been hurt. She did not mention Raymond again. She simply said someone betrayed me, and I used that betrayal as permission to suspect someone who had done nothing to deserve it. Lillian's expression softened slightly, but the anger remained. Being poor doesn't mean my character belongs to whoever can afford to test it. I know, no, you know now. Vivian nodded. You're right. That answer stopped Lillian. There was no argument, no powerful woman trying to win, only an apology. After a moment, Lillian sat again. Vivian looked at the diamond. You know what bothers me most? What you returned this when you believed nobody was watching. She touched Lillian's operational report. Yesterday you admitted a mistake knowing everybody would be watching. Lillian said nothing. The second one tells me more about you. Why? Because honesty is harder when your own reputation is what might be lost. Lillian looked down at her coffee. Does that mean I'm keeping the job? Vivian almost smiled. I'm not telling you that. Of course not. Your 30 days aren't finished. Lillian shook her head. You really enjoy making people wait. I'm learning that may be one of my flaws. This time Lillian smiled faintly. Vivian picked up the ring. I thought selling this would close something. Will you? I don't know. Lillian stood. At the door she paused. I'm still angry. You should be. But thank you for telling me. Vivian nodded. After Lillian left, Vivian remained beside the window. For years she had believed Raymond's betrayal taught her to be careful. Now she understood it had also taught her to be suspicious. Those were not the same thing. The diamond had tested Lillian's integrity. But Vivian finally understood that the same night had tested hers, and she had been the one who failed. 6 days later, the 30-day pilot ended. Despite the spoiled shipment, the final numbers were stronger than anyone had predicted. But when Lillian entered the boardroom for her review, she would learn that the biggest change was not hidden in the waste percentage. It was in what had happened to the people working inside the kitchen. What Lillian earned 30 days after Lillian Sanchez first walked into the East Baltimore kitchen wearing a badge marked temporary. She returned to the Whitmore Community Foods boardroom. This time she did not consider turning around. Her navy thrift store blazer was the same. Her shoes were the same. But Lillian was not. Daniel Foster sat at the head of the table. Renee Parker was beside him. Vivian Whitmore sat near the window. A report lay in front of each person. Daniel looked at Lillian. Ready as I'll ever be. He turned to the first page. Food waste decreased 21%. Lillian blinked. She had calculated the numbers herself, but hearing them aloud felt different. Daniel continued. Food costs decreased despite the shipment loss on day 24. He turned another page. Donation volume to our partner shelter increased 34%. Lillian glanced at Renee. Renee gave the smallest nod. Daniel continued. But those aren't the numbers I find most interesting. He pushed another sheet toward Lillian. Employee absences had declined. Unplanned shift changes were down. 2 employees who had previously requested transfers had withdrawn them. What did you change? Daniel asked. Lillian considered her answer. I asked people why things weren't working. That's it, no. Then I listened. Renee leaned forward. She also changed the schedule. Lillian nodded. Several employees had been repeatedly assigned closing shifts, followed by early mornings. It wasn't technically against policy, Lillian explained, but people were exhausted. Exhausted people make mistakes. Then we blamed them for making mistakes. Daniel looked at Vivian. Vivian said nothing. This meeting belonged to Lillian. Daniel closed the report. We'd like to offer you a permanent position as operations coordinator. For several seconds, Lillian did not respond. Permanent. The word felt larger than the salary figure on the document Daniel slid toward her. She read carefully. The pay was more than she had ever earned. Health insurance, paid leave, a predictable schedule, a retirement contribution 6 months earlier she might have signed before reaching the second page. Now she kept reading. Daniel smiled slightly. Take your time. I am? Lillian reached the benefits section. Is tuition reimbursement available for this position? Yes. How soon after the probationary period? Lillian looked up. I'd like that included in writing. Renee raised an eyebrow. Daniel smiled. That can be done. And the salary? What about it? Lillian named a number slightly higher than the offer. Her heart hammered as she said it. The room became quiet. For years she had been grateful whenever someone gave her extra hours. Negotiating felt almost disrespectful. Then she reminded herself this was not charity. She had reduced waste 21%, Daniel countered. Lillian countered again. They settled between the 2 numbers. When she finally signed, her hand trembled. Not because she felt rescued, because she had negotiated for something she had earned. Vivian waited until the others left. You surprised Daniel. I surprised myself. You didn't just say thank you and sign. I almost did. What stopped you? Lillian looked at the contract. I kept thinking about what you said. The ring got your attention, the work got me here. Vivian nodded. So I figured I should let the work speak. That's exactly what you did. Lillian slipped the contract into her bag. Then she paused. There's something else. What Harold Mitchell? The cook from Harbor Light. He's been there 16 years. Vivian listened. He understands production better than Curtis ever did. He helped me build the proposal when he had nothing to gain from it. What are you asking nothing special? Lillian placed a handwritten phone number on the table. If Whitmore needs kitchen trainers, interview him. Vivian looked at the paper. Interview, not hire. He'd hate me if I got him hired because I asked. Vivian smiled. You've learned quickly. I had a complicated teacher. 2 weeks later, Harold received an interview. 3 weeks after that, he accepted a position as assistant kitchen trainer. When he called Lillian, his first words were, "You're trouble. You got the job, I got the job. You earned the job." Harold went quiet. Then he said Philadelphia wasn't the only road after all. Lillian understood. No, she said, it wasn't. Her own road reopened the following month. With her permanent employment confirmed, Whitmore's tuition reimbursement program covered part of the certification cost. Lillian paid the remainder herself. The amount still due was familiar, $486. On a Tuesday morning at 9:13, she sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open. Jordan stood behind her shoulder. Do it. Stop breathing on me. I'm not. You absolutely are. The payment page waited. Lillian entered the information. This time there was enough money in her account. Money from her work. Money from a company benefit she had qualified for. No envelope. No diamond. No reward. She clicked Submit. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then payment successful. Enrollment reactivated. Jordan shouted so loudly that Lillian jumped. We did it, I provided emotional support. You ate cereal while I filled out the form. Exactly. Lillian laughed. Then her eyes filled unexpectedly. Jordan noticed. You okay? Yes? She wiped her cheek. I'm really okay. The printer beside the refrigerator produced the receipt. Lillian picked it up. $486. She carried it to the counter. The old glass jar was still there. The masking tape had curled at the corners, but Jordan's blue handwriting remained visible. $1 honest at a time. Lillian placed the receipt beside it. Jordan opened the jar. Should we use this for something now? Inside was more than before. Tips from Harbor Light, coins, small bills, the 2341s Jordan had once tried to give her. Lillian considered it. Not yet. What do we save it for? I don't know. Jordan frowned. You always know. Maybe it doesn't have to be for us. He looked at the jar, then at his mother. What does that mean? Lillian smiled. I'll tell you when I figure it out. The answer came sooner than she expected. Harbor Light Diner was beginning to fail. Without Lillian's unpaid tracking, and with Curtis still ignoring the problems she had documented, food costs climbed. Employees left. Customer complaints increased. Eventually, the owner began examining the books. What he discovered would cost Curtis Bennett his job, and it would bring Lillian Sanchez back to the place where everything had started. Back to Harbor Light. Back to Table 7. But this time she would not be looking underneath it for a diamond. She would notice someone sitting above it, whom everyone else had overlooked. The table Curtis. Never saw. 3 months after Lillian Sanchez left Harbor Light Diner, Curtis Bennett lost his job. Lillian heard about it from Harold. She was standing inside the East Baltimore kitchen at 6:20 a.m., reviewing production numbers when her phone vibrated. Harold's message contained only 4 words. Curtis got fired yesterday. Lillian stared at the screen. She expected satisfaction. It never came. Curtis had reduced her hours when she tried to build something better. He had mocked her certificate. He had treated her ideas as if ambition from a waitress were some kind of insult. Still, imagining him carrying his belongings out of Harbor Light did not feel like victory. She put the phone away. At 9:40 that morning, another call came. The number was unfamiliar. Lillian Sanchez. Yes, my name is Robert Ellis. My family owns Harbor Light. Lillian stepped away from the production floor. What can I do for you? I think I should be asking what you can do for us. Robert explained what the audit had uncovered. Food costs had risen steadily. Inventory records were inconsistent. Overtime was poorly controlled. Employee turnover had accelerated. Nothing suggested one dramatic act of theft or fraud. The diner was dying from neglect. A little waste here. A scheduling mistake there. A manager who stopped listening. Robert had found Lillian's old notes in a drawer. I understand you warned Curtis about some of this. I tried. Would you come look at the operation? Lillian hesitated. Harbor Light had paid her bills for years. It had also kept her small because certain people there could not imagine her becoming anything else. I'm not coming back as a waitress. I'm not asking you to. Then send me the numbers. 3 days later, Lillian walked through Harbor Light's front door, carrying a laptop instead of an apron. The bell above the door sounded exactly the same. The red booths were still cracked. The coffee still smelled slightly burned, but the room felt different. A young waitress hurried between too many tables. 2 customers waited at the register. The kitchen bell rang repeatedly. Robert Ellis approached. Thank you for coming. Show me the books. For the next 2 hours, Lillian reviewed invoices, schedules, and waste logs. Or more accurately, the absence of waste logs. The problems were worse than she remembered. She gave Robert a simple plan. Reduce oversized orders, introduce inventory rotation, track waste by reason, build schedules at least 2 weeks ahead, create a food donation relationship with a nearby pantry. Robert listened. Then he asked, can you implement it? I already have a full-time job. We can pay you as a consultant. The word made Lillian pause. Consultant? Curtis once laughed at the idea. What are your conditions? Robert asked. Lillian looked toward the dining room. Employees don't get blamed for reporting waste. Robert nodded. Schedules get posted consistently. Okay. And if somebody working the floor identifies a problem, management listens before deciding their job title makes them wrong. Robert understood exactly where that came from. Agreed. Lillian accepted a 6-week consulting arrangement. She did not save Harbor Light overnight. She trained, measured, adjusted. She asked cooks what they saw, asked dishwashers what came back untouched, asked servers which portions customers rarely finished. Within 4 weeks, food waste began falling. The diner started donating safe surplus soup bread and packaged food twice a week. One Thursday evening, Lillian returned to check the dinner shift. She had almost finished when something near the window caught her attention. Table 7. A young black mother sat there with a boy, perhaps 6 years old. The woman wore a grocery store uniform beneath an old coat. In front of the boy was a bowl of chicken soup. In front of his mother was nothing. Lillian watched her count coins beneath the table. Quarters, dimes, a few dollar bills. The boy pushed his soup toward her. You can have some. I'm not hungry. Lillian recognized the lie instantly. Parents had been telling that lie forever. The waitress approached with the check. The mother looked at it. How much is the bread? $3.25. Can you take it off? You haven't ordered it yet. I know. I was just asking. The waitress walked away. Nobody was cruel to the woman. Nobody insulted her. Nobody even noticed her. Sometimes being overlooked did not look like injustice. Sometimes it looked like a room full of people continuing their meals. Lillian walked into the kitchen. Do we have soup left? The cook nodded. And bread plenty. Add both to table 7. The waitress overheard. They didn't order bread. I know. Who's paying put it against my consulting meal? You have a consulting meal I do now? The waitress laughed. You're making that up. Then put my name beside it. Minutes later, warm bread arrived at table 7 with another bowl of soup. The mother looked confused. I didn't order this. The waitress glanced toward Lillian. Lillian shook her head gently. No explanation. The waitress understood. Kitchen had extra. The woman looked toward the kitchen. Are you sure? Absolutely? Her son immediately tore a roll in half. "This one's yours." This time his mother accepted it. Lillian turned away. There was no Vivian Whitmore outside the window. No billionaire watching. No diamond on the floor. No possible job waiting at the end of the decision. Nobody would reward her. That was precisely why the moment mattered. Later, after the dinner rush, Lillian sat alone at table 7. For the first time since finding the diamond, she looked underneath it. Nothing. Only a forgotten paper straw wrapper. She smiled. Robert sat across from her. "You know we're improving. We are. You ever think about buying this place?" Lillian laughed. "With what I'm serious, I'm not. Not yet." She shook her head. "My goal isn't owning a diner. What is it?" Lillian looked toward the kitchen. The young waitress was showing a new employee how to label leftover food for donation. "I think I want to build places where people can learn how to move forward." Robert leaned back. "That sounds expensive. Everything useful is expensive somehow." Her phone buzzed. "Jordan, are you coming home for dinner?" Lillian checked the time. For years, she had missed dinners with him because she was serving everyone else's. She typed, "Leaving now." Then another message arrived. From Vivian. "Call me tomorrow. I found a building you should see." Lillian stared at the words. The next morning, Vivian drove her to an abandoned commercial kitchen owned by Whitmore Community Foods. Dust covered the counters. Several appliances needed replacing. One ceiling panel was missing. "It's terrible," Lillian said. Vivian smiled. "I know. Why are we here? We're consolidating production elsewhere." So Vivian walked into the center of the empty kitchen. "You once told me you wanted a better shift." "I remember. Then you wanted management." "Yes." Vivian looked around the room. "What if the next step isn't managing people who already have opportunities?" Lillian became quiet. "What are you suggesting, a training kitchen? For who? Entry-level workers? Parents returning to work? Dishwashers who want certifications? Servers who want operations experience?" Lillian slowly looked around again. This time she did not see dust. She saw workstations, classes, people learning inventory, food safety, production planning. She imagined Harold teaching knife skills. She imagined workers earning certificates before one missing bus fare or one unexpected bill forced them to quit. Then she remembered the glass jar on her kitchen counter, the money Jordan had once offered her. "Maybe it doesn't have to be for us." Lillian looked at Vivian. "If we do this, I have conditions." Vivian smiled. "I would be disappointed if you didn't." As afternoon light entered through the dusty windows, Lillian walked through the abandoned kitchen a second time. Years earlier, she had believed she needed someone to save her. Now she understood the greater gift had been different. Someone had opened a door. She had walked through it herself. And standing in that empty kitchen, Lillian began imagining how many doors they might build for others. The jar on the counter. 1 year later, the abandoned commercial kitchen no longer looked abandoned. At 6:45, on a Monday morning, sunlight poured through restored windows onto stainless steel workstations. New refrigerators hummed along one wall. Whiteboards listed inventory exercises, food safety procedures, and production targets. Above the main entrance hung a simple sign, "Whitmore Workforce Kitchen." Lillian Sanchez had rejected 3 more impressive names. One of them had included her own. Vivian Whitmore had suggested it during a planning meeting. "The Sanchez Training Center, no. You rejected that quickly, because it sounds like I died." Vivian laughed. Then the Lillian Sanchez Culinary Opportunity Program. Worse, why Lillian had looked through the glass wall toward 12 trainees practicing inventory counts. Because people walking in here don't need to be reminded of somebody else's success story. They need to see their own path. Vivian had not argued. So Whitmore Workforce Kitchen remained. It was not a charity kitchen. That distinction mattered deeply to Lillian. Trainees applied. They attended classes. They completed food safety certifications. They learned inventory management, production planning, cost control scheduling, and kitchen operations. Some were single parents. Some had spent years washing dishes or clearing tables. Others were returning to work after long gaps. Lillian knew what many of them had in common. They had been working hard for years. What they lacked was not discipline. It was access. At 7:10 that morning, Harold Mitchell stood in front of a cutting station. "Knife doesn't care how confident you are," he told 6 trainees. "Respect it." Lillian watched from the doorway. Harold noticed her. "You supervising me. Evaluating. You were carrying coffee 6 months ago. A year ago. Still disrespectful." She smiled. Harold had become one of the program's most popular instructors. He taught technique without making beginners feel foolish. Once Lillian had asked why, Harold's answer was simple. People remember who made them ashamed to learn. She never forgot it. Her own life had changed too. Her food service management certificate hung in her office. She had completed the final exam 4 months earlier. Jordan insisted on framing the certificate himself. It hung slightly crooked. Lillian refused to straighten it. Her position at Whitmore had expanded. She now oversaw waste reduction programs across several kitchens while spending 2 days each week at the training center. Her salary was stable. The Malibu had finally been replaced, though not with anything extravagant. Lillian bought a 3-year-old Honda Accord after comparing prices for 6 weeks. Jordan called the decision aggressively responsible. Most importantly, they ate dinner together more often, not every night, but often enough that it no longer felt like a special occasion. One Tuesday evening, Jordan sat at the kitchen table doing homework when Lillian placed the old glass jar beside him. The masking tape had yellowed. His blue handwriting remained. $1 honest at a time. Jordan looked at it. "You still have this?" "Of course. I wrote that when I was 10. You were very philosophical. I was weird. You still are." He shook the jar. It contained 143,62. "What are we doing with it?" Lillian sat opposite him. "Remember when you offered it to me for school? Yeah? And I said maybe someday it wouldn't have to be for us." Jordan nodded. "I figured out what I meant." The next morning, the jar appeared on the reception counter at Whitmore Workforce Kitchen. Beside it was a small card explaining the idea. Employees could contribute voluntarily. No required amount. The money would cover small barriers that existing programs often ignored. A bus pass, work shoes, a certification fee, childcare for an exam day. Lillian called it the opportunity jar. Vivian saw it during her next visit. "This is your financial strategy. It's part of one." Vivian picked up the jar. $143. $143.62. "Forgive me." Lillian smiled. The company can fund tuition programs. Grants can pay for training, but sometimes somebody doesn't need $5,000. She pointed toward the classroom. They need $30 to get to work until Friday. Vivian looked again at Jordan's handwriting. $1 honest at a time. That's how we survived for a while. And now maybe somebody else gets to move forward with it. Vivian put $20 into the jar. Lillian immediately looked at her. "What? You're not putting $1,000 in there. I put 20. I saw. I'm learning." Lillian laughed. Over the following months, the jar slowly filled and emptied. There were no ceremonies when money was used, no photographs, no social media posts. A trainee named Marcus needed non-slip shoes, $42. A mother named Brianna Lewis needed a weekly bus pass after her car stopped running, $28. Another trainee needed a food handler certification fee, $35. Each time money left, someone eventually added more. Harold contributed $5 every Friday. Renee Parker, who had once called Lillian a charity project, quietly started contributing $10. Even Jordan occasionally dropped change inside. One afternoon, Vivian found Lillian watching trainees through the classroom window. "You know what's strange?" Vivian asked. "What I thought I changed your life?" Lillian turned. Vivian smiled faintly. "It's embarrassing to admit." "A little?" "Thank you." Lillian laughed. Vivian continued, "But I didn't." "You opened a door. You did the rest." "No." Lillian pointed toward Harold. "He helped." Then toward Renee. "She challenged me. She tapped the glass jar. Jordan reminded me who I wanted to be." She looked back at Vivian. "And you eventually learned to stop testing me." Vivian accepted the correction. Eventually. Lillian's expression softened. People like stories where one person saves another. Cleaner. Life usually isn't. Vivian looked around the training center. "So what happened here?" "A lot of people opened small doors." Vivian nodded. That afternoon, Brianna Lewis approached Lillian. She was 27, raising a 4-year-old daughter, and had previously worked in a hospital cafeteria. Her attendance had been perfect until that week. "You okay?" Lillian asked. Brianna forced a smile. "Yeah." Lillian recognized the answer because she had used it herself. "What happened?" "My car died. Can it be fixed eventually?" "How are you getting here?" "2 buses." And Brianna looked down. "I'm figuring it out." Lillian did not push, but later she checked the attendance system. Brianna had missed 2 afternoon sessions. Her final certification assessment was 3 weeks away. Lillian looked toward the reception counter. The opportunity jar sat beneath the morning light. Inside were bills and coins from people who would never know exactly whose life their contributions touched. Lillian remembered $486. She remembered $23.41 spread across her kitchen table. She remembered Jordan offering everything in the jar because he thought his mother's future was worth emptying it. Now the jar existed for a different reason. Not to empty tomorrow, to help someone reach it. 3 weeks later, Brianna would stand at the first graduation ceremony of Whitmore Workforce Kitchen. And only then would Lillian discover just how close she had come to disappearing from the program. The reason would be $73. A small amount beside a diamond. But Lillian had learned long ago that the value of money depended entirely on which door it allowed someone to reach. Nothing under the table. On the morning of Whitmore Workforce Kitchen's first graduation, Vivian Whitmore opened a small wooden box in her bedroom. Inside lay the diamond ring. She had not worn it since the night she lost it at Harbor Light Diner. For months she had considered selling it. Other times she considered giving it away. Eventually she realized both choices were attempts to make the ring decide something for her. So Vivian sat at her desk and wrote a letter to her granddaughter. She wrote about Raymond. Not only about his betrayal. She wrote about the young man who had once delivered meals in a borrowed van, the husband who made her laugh, the business partner who later became afraid enough to lie. She refused to turn him into either a villain or a saint. Then she wrote, "A beautiful thing cannot repair a painful past, but pain does not have to decide who you become afterward." Vivian folded the letter and placed it beneath the ring. Then she closed the box. For the first time in years, she did not feel the need to decide anything else about it. At 2:00 p.m., 12 graduates stood inside Whitmore Workforce Kitchen. Their families filled rows of folding chairs. Harold Mitchell wore a tie that Jordan insisted made him look suspiciously respectable. Renee Parker distributed certificates. Vivian sat in the second row rather than on stage. Lillian stood at the podium. She looked at the graduates. A year earlier, she had been carrying plates at Harbor Light, trying to find $486 before noon. Now she was expected to say something meaningful. So she kept it simple. "Most people in this room did not need somebody to save them," she said. "They needed somebody to stop assuming that where they started was where they belonged." The room became quiet. A door matters. But the person still has to walk through it. She looked toward Harold. "Sometimes someone holds that door for you." Then toward Vivian. Sometimes someone opens one after learning they should have noticed you sooner. Vivian smiled. And sometimes you build the next door yourself. Applause filled the room. After the ceremony, Lillian found Brianna Lewis near the reception counter holding her certificate. Brianna's 4-year-old daughter was beside her. You did it, Lillian said. Barely. That still counts. Brianna looked at the opportunity jar. I wanted to tell you something. Lillian waited. 3 weeks ago, I was going to quit. Because of the car, Brianna nodded. 2 buses each way? Then the certification fee came due. How much? $73 total, transportation and the remaining fee. Lillian looked at the jar. I had $19. Brianna continued. I figured missing the certification was better than missing rent. Someone in administration had told her about the fund. Brianna had resisted. I didn't want charity. What changed your mind? They told me it wasn't charity. Brianna smiled. They said people put money in because somebody had helped them once. Lillian felt something tighten in her throat. $73. Less than the $77.94 that had once sat in Jordan's jar when she lost her own enrollment. Back then, it had not been enough to save her deadline. Now nearly the same amount had helped someone else reach hers. Brianna's daughter tugged at her sleeve. Mommy, can we go in a minute? Brianna looked at Lillian. When I start working, I'm putting the 73 back. Lillian shook her head. No. Brianna frowned. Why put in what you can? But I used 73. The point isn't paying a debt. Lillian glanced at the jar. The point is keeping the door open. Brianna nodded slowly. That evening, Lillian and Jordan drove to Harbor Light Diner. It had become a tradition to eat there after important days. They arrived at 7:18. The diner was busy. A young waitress greeted them. 2-2. Anywhere you like. Jordan immediately pointed. Table 7. Lillian laughed. Of course. They slid into the familiar booth. Jordan had grown taller. His voice had started changing. He no longer looked like the little boy who had poured 23/41 across their kitchen table. He picked up the menu. You're paying, right? I invited you. Just confirming. They ordered burgers, fries, and 2 milkshakes. Halfway through dinner, Jordan dropped his napkin. He leaned beneath the table to retrieve it. Then he stayed there. Lillian raised an eyebrow. What are you doing? Jordan emerged. Checking. For what, a diamond? She laughed. Find anything gum? Very old gum. Leave it. Jordan looked under the table again. Seriously. Nothing. Lillian leaned down. The chrome table leg was still scratched. The floor had been replaced, but she knew exactly where the ring had rested. For a moment she remembered herself crouching there, tired, afraid, holding something worth more than everything in her bank account. She sat upright. Nothing that belongs to us. Jordan smiled. That sounds like you. What does that mean you say stuff like that now? I always did. No, you got worse. Lillian threw a fry at him. After dinner, Jordan went outside to answer a call from a friend. Lillian remained to pay. At the counter, she noticed their waitress counting tips. The young woman looked exhausted. You closing? Lillian asked. Midnight? Long day double. Lillian recognized the answer beneath the answer. She paid the bill. Then she left a tip, larger than usual, but not absurdly large, enough to make tomorrow easier. Not enough to become a miracle. Before leaving, Lillian asked for a pen. On a small piece of receipt paper, she wrote 5 words, 1 honest dollar at a time. She placed it beneath the tip. No name, no explanation. Then she walked outside. The waitress returned minutes later. She saw the money first, then the note. She read it twice. Her expression changed. Lillian never saw that. That mattered. Outside, Jordan waited beside the car. You ready, yeah? As they drove away, Harbor Light's lights disappeared behind them. Vivian had once watched Lillian make an honest choice when Lillian believed nobody was watching. Now Lillian had done something kind without staying to see how it was received. The circle was complete. The diamond had not changed her life. It had only caused someone to look closely enough to notice what had always been there: her discipline, her intelligence, her dignity, her capacity to work. Vivian opened a door. Harold opened another. Jordan protected the part of her that refused to give up. And Lillian walked through every door herself. More importantly, she had learned to hold them open behind her, because sometimes the difference between being forgotten and moving forward is not a miracle. Sometimes it is simply being seen, and then being given a fair chance to show what you can do. Integrity is often described as doing the right thing when no one is watching. But Lillian's story reveals something deeper. Integrity is not a bargain with life. It does not guarantee that tomorrow will become easier. Lillian returned the diamond, and she still lost her enrollment. She did the right thing, and no miracle immediately arrived. What changed her future was not a wealthy woman handing her enough money to erase every problem. Vivian eventually gave Lillian something more respectful: a door. Lillian still had to prepare, compete, fail, learn, negotiate, and prove herself. That is the difference between rescuing someone and empowering them, and kindness works the same way. Jordan's little jar could not solve his mother's problems. Years later, however, the same idea helped Brianna cross the final $73 gap, standing between her and an opportunity. One honest dollar at a time was never really about money. It was about how lives are built. One choice, one chance, one person deciding not to look away. If this story reminded you of someone who helped you when they had nothing to gain, tell us about them in the comments. And if you believe more people need stories about dignity, second chances, and quiet kindness, share this story and subscribe. There is always another door worth holding open.